Hello guys, welcome back on my YouTube channel. So today I'm going to explain some things related to our result analysis articles, and we decided to praise the titles as examining the contradictions of Australian education revolution. Of course, I with my partner Jacinta Anastasia Karismapati and me Igusti Agumayu Sasmita Deanita. Alright, so we are entering the table of contents. So they are the seventh part of the table of contents, and I'm gonna to explain for you all about the introduction, research question, research objectives, and research methods. And Jacinta will explain about findings, discussions, and conclusion. Alright. So we enter with introductions part. So in introductions part, we finally decided there are four parts related about our results to analyze articles. So the first part is summarize the issues which relate to the keyword. And we finally decided, after we analyze, we read the articles, the keyword is about contradictions and the education revolutions in Australia. So we summarize in the introduction part is Captain Root led LP to victory in the federal election in 2007, and of course because they are the education revolutions word related with the keywords we have to decide it. So we finally including in our summarize. Second, about summarize the theories that the writers use to prove his or their claims. And we finally got the summarized given the tensions and competitions as well as contradiction in some of policies and new forms of government set up under the banners of the Australian education revolution. Some context is provided for the latest wave of the river. And you can highlight some context is provided for the latest wave of reform. So that we finally including to our summary the theories that the writers have to decide or to prove in their claims. Okay, the third summarize the evidence or including the facts, expert opinion or research result. So we finally decided the summarize is the federal government is much more involved, and we make some praise of this summarize. Okay, if you can see the fact that the divisions of labor between federal government and other state is clear, and that was the evidence that our results to summarize the evidence what the writers gonna to prove or argue the issues. So finally, write the novelties or the on the other word something new in the paper or research. And we finally decided to make one praise. The author provides several contexts of the latest educational reform that will be discussed in the article. Same point with the first summarize related to the keyword. If you can highlight on the last sentence, contradictions in every sentence, and in the seconds some context is provided for the latest wave of reform. Alright, so we move to second contents is research question. Alright, so I'm with Jacinta have to decide it based on a real article we have to read. So we have to decide it. There are the three research questions that writers gonna to prove. First, what is the effect of the educational revolution policies of the education revolution have had on the Australian education system? And second, why the educational revolution is a contradiction in relation to treatment of their teaching professions, and what is the education funding policy during the educational revolution? Alright, we enter with the third research objective. So research objectives related with research questions. So the first is writers gonna to prove what affects the policies of the education revolution. So finally we have to decide it, and based on the article we have to read, the writers examine to prove education's what the effect of the education revolution. So second, to prove the education revolution is contradictory in relation to its treatment of the teaching profession. And the last, writers gonna to develop that all children are engaged in and benefiting from schools, and there was one to that writers prove and show up their readers. Alright, so the last of my part, research method. So I'm gonna to explain for you in the briefly what the research design. So we finally decided to, on the basis of the article we have to read, the research design, what the research design author used is research and development. Why? Because writers gonna to develop something, researchers gonna to prove and develop the children and educations in Australia. And the setting, of course, Australians, citizens, Australians, but in fields of economic and education. And the participants, Australian communities. And the data collections method, of course, because the research design in research and development, so the data collection method from documents and record and observations. An instrument that it used to collect the data is archival document and observations. Why? Because archival document and government source, the research is such from the readings that the author read, since from every quote taken from various literature that are used as evidence. So observations, the author seem to using observation method because their research based on their natural environment. So the last data analysis method, we finally decided to choose exploratory analysis because there's so many about the writers tend to gonna prove some things, and of course there are author arguments and author point of view. So we finally decided there is exploratory analysis. Alright, so that's all about me, and I will give it to Giacinta Karisma Pati. Thank you so much.
Alright, I'm Giacinta Anastasia. We'll continuing Anggita explanation before. Findings. We have 3 findings. First one, the effect is coalition government had neglected and underfunded education in the 11 years that they held power and argued that their proposed education revolution would be a continuation of the vital economic reform started by the Hawke or Keating Labour governments. The second, the importance of teachers is recognized, with good teaching described as being the key to achieving a world-class system, according to Connell 2009. In her critique of the new registration regime, describes how managerialist codified professional standards embody a distrust of teachers. Judgment rely on an individualist rather than collective models of work and criticizes the arbitrary nature of dot points list, which potentially lead a narrowing of teacher practice. The Teach for Australia program and the Labour parties Teach Next initiative involve recruiting high-achieving non-education graduates for a 6-week training course and then placing them as teachers into difficult-to-staff schools. While these are relatively new schemes for Australia, research out of the US suggests that not only are the participants of these programs less effective than universities-trained teachers, but they often leave the teaching profession before 2 years. Hammond, Holtman, Gedlin, and Halleck 2005. The existence of such programs undermines the idea that teachers are highly trained intellectual workers. And the last, this is the desired outcomes of the education revolution are described in the budget document. The education revolution represents a major injection of funding into Australia's education system, but much of this funding is going towards one-off projects and is not a commitment to increase future funding. Although the education revolution is constituted by policies running from early childhood education through the years of workforce participation, much emphasis has been placed upon the policies that impact upon the formal years of schooling. The education revolution claims to be a transformation of teaching and learning in schools. And the next is this discussion. Mianangita discussion that the effect of the education revolution in Australia education is coalition government had neglected and underfunded education in the 11 years, and its contradiction in relation to its treatment of teaching profession because Labour Party's Teach Next took the initiative to appoint graduates who are non-education graduates and graduates who did graduate. For school graduate educators are said to be distrust of teacher because the assessment is based on individual assessments. Based on the budget document are described that the education revolution represents a major injection of funding into Australia's education system. But in fact, much of this funding is only one of projects and it's not a commitment to increase future funding. So that's why in their research the author going to show what the effect of education revolution in Australian education and gonna to develop that all children are engaged in and benefiting from schooling. Young people are meeting basic literacy and numeracy basic standards, and overall levels of literacy and numeracy achievement are improving. That schooling promotes social inclusion and reduce educational disadvantage of children. The next is conclusion. In the tension between basic literacies and new literacies, we can see firstly that education in Australia is like elsewhere caught between two paradigms, the old and the new. How long it will be before this tension is adequately resolved is not clear. What is clear, however, is that more research is needed into not just the successful and innovative schools that are openly embracing the educational opportunities that new technologies bring, but research into schools where this is not happening needs to be undertaken in order to provide critical insight into how schools are dealing with the competing paradigms. Secondly, while the impact of the education revolution has not yet been fully realized, these policy initiatives are having a discernible influence both in schools and in teacher education. The effect of neoliberal policies which individualist teachers work and is reshaping teachers' education into an exercise of ticking graduates against the boxes of the federal professional standards categories needs to be replaced with efficient that educates and engages teachers in the complex political and policy arena of education. Okay, that's all our explanation relate with the result our analysis article. Thank you so much for watching and goodbye.